Gro Ventures, an information and advisory business that focuses on African commodities, has announced the formation of two operating units, Gro Intelligence and Gro Energy. For more on this, we're joined by Sarah Menker, CEO at Gro Ventures. She's joining us from Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah. Great to have you on the show. So you've got an interesting story. Of course, you were born in Ethiopia. You spent some time as a vice president at Morgan Stanley's commodities group. So kind of global exposure to the commodities space. And you've chosen to come back to Africa and specifically focus on agricultural commodities. Of course, there are gaps in the information supply chain, but talk to us about what informed this decision.
I mean, what informed this decision was really a desire by myself to start investing in the agricultural space in Africa, and finding that I couldn't, find the information I really wanted fast enough and accurate enough. And so, the more businesses I looked at and the more opportunities I looked at, I realized that there was this massive gap when it came to understanding the flow of commodity markets on the African continent in general. So it was really driven by a desire to start filling in information gaps.
Now, when it comes to Gro Intelligence, I mean, that's the operational unit that's really going to focus on agricultural commodities. How is that going to work? Where are you going to source your data from, given the fact that the system as it stands right now isn't very efficient, and of course, hard to really put all the information together and present something meaningful?
I mean, we've spent a tremendous amount of time in the past year already kind of looking at sources that are already out there, but perhaps don't do a good job of kind of aggregating the information they have and actually, completing the picture by mixing it in with other sources. So we've identified various sources that range from government institutions to development agencies, as well as kind of, feeds from the private sector that we find, and integrated them in such a way that you have a very user-friendly tool that one can go to ask, kind of very relevant yet simple and incredibly important questions about the African agricultural landscape.
If this happens and you are able to provide timely information, relevant information to investors, do you think that this could be a catalyst for investors into the agricultural space in Africa?
This could be a massive catalyst. It could completely unleash the financial sector in a way that it hasn't before. 1% of outstanding bank loans or commercial bank loans are to the agricultural sector today. The way we understand agriculture, the way we estimate its contribution to GDP is we think it's somewhere between 35 to 40% of GDP for the African continent. When you have something that's contributing that much to GDP, but really receiving only 1% of bank loans, you see this tremendous opportunity in kind of unleashing a sector. And once you unleash the financial sector, all else follows.
And then, of course, you've also have a focus on energy, and we know that there's an energy deficit in Africa, and many investors globally and in the African continent are looking to invest. So tell us about Gro Energy and specifically what you plan to do differently when it comes to providing information on that front.
I think, with Gro Energy, our intention is to kind of marry the two worlds of both kind of what's happening on the public sector front, as well as interests by private companies. I have a really strong belief that for us to truly capture the value and maximize the value of the kind of natural resources we have on the continent, you must have very stable fiscal regimes so that investments can come in on a continuous basis and kind of continue to grow. And so, I think what we're doing very differently is that we're, simultaneously engaging with both the public sector in trying to help them think through, how they maximize gains for their countries, as much as we are talking to, companies about how they can enter the space and navigate it better.
And of course, when it comes to the private sector and understanding the various landscapes and the various economies where you are seeing a boom in the oil and gas sector, how much information is provided out there as it stands right now, or is it really a learned by doing process? There's a tremendous amount of information out there, very similar to the story on agriculture, but kind of a little more condensed because, the number of players are fewer, is that there is information, but again, it's quite disjointed, and so you have to spend a tremendous amount of time gathering it and kind of putting the pieces together to figure out what the best investment decisions are. So, of course, as you say, just putting it all together to make it relevant and meaningful. The oil and gas space right now, is there a lot of interest from investors that you're speaking to? What specific territories do you think are going to see the most amount of investment flows? I mean, we know that the story is playing out across Africa. We know that Mozambique, Kenya, the East African space is seeing a lot of interest. But from your side, where are you seeing specific interest right now?
All the interest we're seeing as well is really focused in on East Africa. Historically, East Africa has been highly underexplored relative to the rest of the continent, and that was because, the last time exploration happened was in, the late 70s and the 80s, where people were unsuccessful, kind of left. And there were success stories throughout West Africa and Central Africa and Northern Africa. So the number of wells you have operating in East Africa today relative to the West or Central or Northern Africa is minuscule. You're looking at something like 700 wells in Eastern Africa versus 20,000 wells in Northern and Central Africa and about 15,000 wells in Western Africa. So there's a tremendous amount of investment interest in Eastern Africa, especially driven by kind of the significant finds in Mozambique and Tanzania, and now kind of people venturing more into Kenya and kind of determining the viability of finds, as well as Uganda and oil.
Let's just go back to the agricultural commodities space. And of course, government plays a very critical role in this. A lot of government prioritizing right now is really about taking advantage of all the arable land that many economies have in Africa. So where do you see examples of government getting it right when it comes to policy around agriculture?
I think where I see government getting it right, first step is actually collecting good information, writing policies and regulations that require people to report certain amounts of information to the government. So the government itself can be quite proactive about policy making and not reactive. We oftentimes react to something that happens in our agricultural landscape when it comes to food security. We're never proactive. And so, I think where it can get it right in terms of even encouraging investment is kind of effectively the same as where it can get it right with kind of also ensuring food security. And I truly believe it's data combined with kind of the right incentives to allow investors to come in and kind of build up the infrastructure as well as the land.